YouTube. We're going to take a quick tour of my card collection. Luckily, I have everything except for Stasis, and Stasis doesn't need to be mentioned because it's trash. Not really. Some people play Stasis, but I'm not going to talk about it. I had a question from a viewer about what cards are good. I want to just sort of briefly talk about which cards are good. Right at the top here, we have two cards which are really good for slowing monsters. Bombardier and Cold Mage, they're both very good. Bombardier will slow one at a time and does decent damage too. 75 damage, and it says has a chance to stun the target. Chance of subsequent stun is decreased. Cold Mage lowers target's movement speed on every hit. Cold Mage has become sort of a part of the meta, especially if you're playing Inquisitor. Both of them very good cards for slowing things down. On that top rung, that's about it. Second rung or second row, we don't care. Next row, Chemist. Chemist is a very good card, but it's sort of dependent on other cards. Increases the damage taken by the target, sort of puts a debuff on the boss or the monster, whatever it's hitting. So it's good for stuff like Boreas, which has a fast attack rate, and each one of those attacks does more damage because of it. If we look at the next row, there's some that look like they should be good, but they're not really that good. Really, the best one here is Engineer. Am I on the TV? I mean, the YouTube? Am I on the YouTube? Yeah, you are. Hopefully. Engineer, one of the most important damage-dealing cards of the game. The big damage-dealing cards. Engineer, Boreas, Inquisitor. And then some people, depending on what you're running, some people do Zealot, but I don't know enough about Zealot to talk about it that much. The next rung, Mime. Let's talk about Mime and what Mime does. Mime can be merged with any other unit of the same merging rank. So this is what I was doing before. I'm going to do it right this time. Mime. You have one tier 1 Mime. You actually, let's say you have a tier 1 Engineer. Tier 1 Mime. Engineer, Mime. You get a tier 2 random unit. So Mime can be attached to anything else of the same merging rank and then becomes something random one tier higher. Plague Doctor, very good for crowd control, especially in lower level early rounds. It infects enemies, causing them to leave behind a poison cloud on death, and that can deliver a lot of damage, especially in the first few rounds. If we go to the next one, Vampire is one of the more important cards in the game. Did receive a big nerf in the last level or last round of balance changes, but it bites the target, making it periodically give you mana. Maybe in another video I can explain Vampire Economy. Somebody explained it to me and it bumped my gameplay up a lot. If you're not running Vampire, you have to run something that sort of makes up for Vampire most often. Some people don't, but most people do. Boreas, first of the legendary cards. Boreas, somebody asked, is Boreas a win condition? To me, yes, it is a win condition, and I think to most, yes, it's a win condition. Boreas is a little bit polarizing. Some people will say you can't get that far with Boreas in the upper levels. Some people do get very far with it. It periodically changes firing phase. First phase increases attack speed. Second phase increases attack speed and critical hit chance. Swagging Doge says, yes, it's a win condition. I agree. Of the damage-dealing legendaries, Boreas is probably the easiest one to deal with because it's not dependent on being next door to something. Although some people pair it with Hex, and we'll get to Hex in a moment. Dryad. Dryad is a card that increases the merging rank of the unit it merges with, so I did this with Mime, we'll do it with Dryad. Tier 1 Engineer. Tier 1 Dryad. Oop. Tier 2 Engineer. So the good thing about Dryad, and the thing that's different about it in Mime, is that you know what you're getting. You put a Dryad on something, and it turns this one into the next tier of the same thing. So it's way more predictable than the other ones. Here's the third of those sort of similar cards, the Harlequin, Dryad, Mime. Harlequin, when merged, creates a copy of any unit with the same merging rank. So instead, Dryad turned this tier 1, if you have two tier 1s, boom, turns this into a tier 2. This one, if we have a tier 1 Engineer, tier 1 Harlequin, and then you get two tier 1 Engineers. So instead of it turning this one into a tier 2, you get another tier 1. It copies, it's like a photocopy. It Xeroxes this one, puts it over here. Inquisitor. some say is the best win condition card in the game. Inquisitor is dependent on having either 1, 4, or 9 of them on the board. If you don't have those amounts, then it's kind of bad. But if you do, it's kind of very good. Hex is an interesting card and sort of is dependent on Boreas. Adds instant kill chance to units on 4 neighboring tiles, so it depends on what's neighboring it. Like if Hex is here, the neighboring tiles are boom, 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 and boom. I'm only talking about the ones that people really play regularly. Summoner. When merged, summons a random unit to a free tile. This unit's rank is random from 1 to the summoner's merge rank. So imagine again we have a... we can't do it with Engineer, but let's say we have a Tier 1 Summoner. Tier 1 Summoner. Boom. You get a Tier 2 something. So in that way, it acts like Mime. It's like a Mime, and then it's also somewhat like Harlequin, but different in that you get a random unit from it. So it's the only one that really gives you a random unit. You get something extra from that. So you would get a Tier 2 something, and you get an extra unit from 1 to the Summoner's merge rank. So if you're merging 2 Tier 7 Summoners, game over. Can Hex instant kill a boss? No. Instant kill only applies to monsters. It does not apply to mini bosses or to bosses. We have one more viable card to talk about, and it's one of the more polarizing cards in the game. It's the Shaman. Shaman, when merged, lowers the merging rank of a random enemy unit by 1. So imagine you have Shaman. This is DZ Daddy, by the way, a YouTube video that we're in the middle of recording right now. So you are right. Shaman. Tier 1. Shaman, Tier 1. Boom. You get a Tier 2 something. Not necessarily a Shaman, but you get a Tier 2 something. Plus, one of your opponent's random units on their board gets downgraded by 1 tier. So if they have a Tier 2 Boreas and that gets hit, it turns into a Tier 1. If they have a Tier 1 Boreas that gets hit, it turns into nothing. It becomes nothing, because that Tier 1 gets taken away. And basically, that's it right now. I'm not going to talk about the other cards because you don't see them a lot. Hopefully, we're going to have a nice round of balance changes sometime soon, but that's basically the ins and outs of the really viable cards right now in Rush Royale. So, thank you very much. Bye, YouTube.